Let's first have an overview of the whole conversation about how to file taxes with an LLC with no income. So the big question is, do you have to file taxes for an LLC with no income? Well, you must always file your LLC taxes when you have business activity. I'm talking about revenue, deductions, and credits. Absent any business activity, you might be able to skip filing your federal LLC tax return, but remember to file your personal tax return when you earn income. So whether you are legally required to file business taxes with no income depends on how your LLC is taxed. Okay, let me just break it down for you. LLCs have the unique ability to be taxed in many ways, and each taxation status has a different constellation of rules for business tax filings. And the thing is, do not forget about state tax filings either. Businesses are registered at the state level, so you might be required to file a state return while being exempt from federal filing. So you want to check with your state tax authority website for more information. You can even contact them. Now, one thing I want to say here is that no matter your LLC tax classification, operating at a loss or with no income does not preclude you from filing your tax return. It's important in the law to file taxes for an LLC with expenses and no income. LLCs with no income but deductible expenses can offset personal income or a future business income through the net operating loss deduction. We actually covered this on another show. So if deductions and credits neutralize your revenue, meaning you reached your company's break-even point, you must still report this activity through an LLC tax return. So bottom line is what? You need to file your LLC taxes when your business brings in money, either through revenue or a loan, or when it's actually eligible for a deduction or tax credit. By filing annual business returns, you are making sure the IRS does not ding you for a failure to file. You also run the risk of appearing like your business is just a hobby when you don't consistently file a return. Okay, so when you treat your business like a hobby, the IRS will do the same. So filing your annual small business taxes, income or not, is one step to prove that you don't treat your business as a hobby and that you are seeking to profit each year. And so I'll go back to another point. Another thing that's very important is that if you have a new LLC, so there may be some years where a limited liability company has zero business activity. So newly formed LLCs may not officially begin operating as a business for a year or more, and older LLCs may slowly become irrelevant. So one thing I want to say here is that if you have a new LLC, please make sure again that you file your return. So in other words, you're telling the IRS, hey, listen, I have not had any activity, but at least I'm filing a tax return. That's a lot better than not filing at all. I want to quickly talk about the filing requirements for sole proprietorships, partnerships, and corporations. By the way, I want to welcome you back to the show. It's just fantastic to have you here. And in today's conversation, we are talking about how to file taxes for an LLC with no income. The thing is that depending on the kind of classification your LLC has, whether it is sole proprietorship, partnership, or corporation, you might have different requirements. So LLC, let's talk about the requirements for LLCs treated as sole proprietorships. So LLCs taxed as sole proprietorships don't have to file an annual federal business tax return in years of no business activity. Only single member LLC, in other words, LLCs with only one owner, can be taxed as sole proprietorships. And single member LLCs are pass-through entities that report business activity on the owner's personal return. And unlike C corporations, pass-through entities are not subject to a uniform small business tax rate. Okay, so pass-through businesses are taxed at their owners' individual tax rates. So that's what the IRS talks about when the IRS talks about the single member LLC being a disregarded entity. Okay, and so your single member LLC files Form 1040 Schedule C to detail business revenue, deductions, and credits to the IRS. Since LLCs are taxed as sole proprietorship, so they don't have to file a separate business tax return. This is what I was just telling you earlier. They are called disregarded entities in the eyes of the IRS. Okay, in other words, they are not separable from their owners for tax purposes. You don't have to file Schedule C for your single member LLC when your company brings in less than $400 for the year. Okay, but the thing that we recommend on this show is that we still recommend attaching Schedule C whenever there is any business activity, though It's not even like that. Even if it's less than 400, it's always good to file. Now, what are the requirements for LLCs treated as partnerships? You don't have to file a federal business return when there is no business activity in your inactive LLC taxed as a partnership. LLC treated as partnerships report their business activity on Form 1065. As a pass-through entity, partnerships pay taxes through each owner's personal return, not at the company level. Still, an LLC taxed as a partnership files information return Form 1065 to relay earnings, deductible business expenses, and credit to the IRS. Now, since partnerships only file information return, they are not considered disregarded entities like businesses taxed as sole proprietorships. Let's talk about the requirements for LLCs treated as S or C corporations. By the way, I want to quickly remind everybody of today's topic. We're having a conversation about how to file taxes for an LLC with no income. So I want to talk about the S or C corporation. When taxed as a corporation, your business must file an annual return even if the company lies dormant. So when you register your LLC, you are automatically taxed as either a sole proprietorship or a partnership, depending on the number of owners who are called members. And you may elect S corporation taxation by filing Form 2553, or you can choose C corporation taxation by filing Form 8832. So remember those two forms, they are quintessential. So 2553 for S corporation and 8832 for C corporation. C corporations will file Form 1120 annually. So C corporations are not pass-through entities. I want to specify that they're not, unlike all other taxation options for LLCs. As a separate taxpayers, C corporations pay a 21% corporate tax rate before distributing earnings through dividends, and shareholders are taxed again on dividends on their personal returns. Okay, so this is what when we talk about double taxation, this is what we mean. S corporation, on the other hand, S corporations must file information return Form 1120S each year, regardless of business activity. And S corporations maintain pass-through taxation, where the business income again is taxed only on the owner's personal returns. And so it's important. You might wonder what a business tax return looks like in years when your LLC is inactive. Well, this might feel weird. You'll be actually writing a lot of zeros on the page. That's all. That's just whatever it is. And tax software can actually walk you through filing your inactive LLC tax return. So one thing I want to say here is that when in doubt, you want to always file an LLC return. Look at it. I want you to look at it this way. The IRS cannot penalize you for filing a return for your inactive LLC, but it can inquire about why you did not file a return at all. So if you have one small business transaction during the year, it's best to file your business taxes, even if it's not required. Let's talk about the main filing deadlines. So those are important elements you need to keep in mind, because you don't want to actually have you don't want to get into trouble. So the filing date for most tax forms is the 15th day of a given month. It can be February, it can be March, it can be April. So in that case, in the case that this falls on a weekend or holiday, it moves to the next business day. Okay. Now, don't worry though. The IRS is not going to give you less. It's not going to give you less time to file your taxes. So your filing date also depends on if you opt for a different fiscal year. So by default, businesses use the calendar year as their fiscal year, meaning you close the books on December 31st. And using the calendar year can be helpful since your business taxes would align with your personal taxes. However, opting for a different fiscal year can benefit seasonal businesses like farms or schools by having their tax season after the peak period or business. And if you don't use a different fiscal year, the month you file in depends on how the IRS views your business. So there are 4 different filing types for your LLC, depending on the structure that you choose. Sole proprietorship. So if your LLC has a single owner, the IRS treats you as a sole proprietorship. So you'll report your business income on Schedule C as part of the IRS Form 1040, your personal tax return. And you have to file taxes by April 15th of this current year for last year's taxes. Okay, and you can actually extend the filing if you want. So with an extension, the deadline for filing goes all the way to October 15th. For a partnership, so if your LLC has multiple owners, the IRS treats you as a partnership. In this case, you must complete the partnership return information, partnership return IRS form 1065. Okay, and form 1065 is where you report your business income and expenses for the year. And so the business does not pay taxes though. So the business owners will receive a Schedule K1 on which from which they can actually pay their taxes. For S corporation, so for a partnership, the date is March 15th. Okay, and the extension actually is 6 months down the road. What about S corporation? S corporation, the date here is actually March 15th also. Okay, and you have to file Form 1120S with the related K1 schedules. And now, what about C corporation? C corporation, the date is April 15th. That's the thing. And with the extension, you go back all the way to October 15th. And one thing I want to say here is that if your LLC opted to be treated as a corporation when it filed Form 8832, then the IRS will treat it as a C corporation. Let's talk about quarterly estimated taxes. By the way, I want to quickly remind everybody of today's topic. We're having a conversation about how to file for an LLC with no income. So this is really important to remember. And one thing I want to say here is that self-employed tax filers and corporations do not necessarily pay taxes all in one go. Okay, it's all about tax planning. It's all about making sure that you have the right information at the right time. So owners of sole proprietorships, partnerships, and S corporations are responsible for making quarterly estimated income tax payments if they will owe over $1,000 in taxes for the year. For corporations, this is lower to over $500 in taxes in the year. So it's all about tax preparation. And the whole thing is to make sure that you have enough cash outflows, enough payments to make sure that at the end of the year, your tax liability is actually it's not greater than how much you have paid throughout the year. Okay, so even first year businesses will have to file quarterly taxes if they expect to exceed this threshold. This is the 1,000 for individuals and 500 for businesses. These tax payments are estimated because they are based on a projection on how much you will earn in the tax year. So those are not actual numbers. Those are forecasted numbers. Okay. If you overpay over the course of the year, you get either a refund or credit towards your next tax payments. Okay. If you underpay, a situation where you don't want to be anyway, you pay the difference after filing your return. So because we were speaking about quarterly estimated payments, there are actually 4, right? And those 4 payments must be made in a fiscal year. So the dates usually fall on April 15th for the first quarter, second quarter, June 15th, third quarter, September 15th, and the fourth quarter, the following January 15th. Okay. Now, how much individuals pay in estimated income taxes is actually calculated using Form 1040-ES. For corporation, they use Form 1120-W. So it's really important to remember that. And if you don't feel like doing paperwork or digging for past returns, there are helpful resources online, and you can even hire a tax practitioner to kind of help you out. Oh, it's always better to actually hire a specialist if you feel like he or she might help you out. So let's talk about how to elect the various tax designations. Now, it's really important to remember that there are 2 different forms you may need to fill out to change your LLC's tax filing type. Okay, so I spoke about that earlier, but I want to dig a little deeper here. Why? Because if you have an LLC, and this is only applies if you are a multi-member LLC, and if you want to, so if you're a multi-member LLC, by default, the IRS is treating you as a 1065 partnership. Now, if you want to change that, in other words, if you want to be taxed as an S corporation or a C corporation, there are some procedures you need to follow. Okay, so remember, the form you use depends on how you want your LLC to file. So the IRS Form 8832 The entity classification election form is what LLC owners use to elect to be taxed as a corporation or disregarded entity or pass-through entity. Okay, and so basically, Form 8832 must be submitted within 75 days of the formation of your business or the start of your fiscal year. So if you use the calendar year as your fiscal year, the last day you can file Form 8832 is March 15th. However, if you need to file late, Part 2 of the form can be filled out to apply for a late election. So those are, again, this form is really flexible. Flexibility is here. Now, the other filing type your business can opt for is the S corporation. Before opting to file as one, you want to get familiar with differences between the LLCs and S corporations. And one thing I want to say here is that S corporations, when it comes to the record keeping, the paperwork and all, the IRS is stricter. So while S corporation may look good on paper, stricter requirements like treating owners as employees and paying them a reasonable salary can add unnecessary complexity to your business. And if you want to file as an S corporation, you must file Form 2553. You can technically file Form 2553 at any time, but when you file it, it will determine when it takes effect. So it's important. And if you want to convert your LLC to an S corporation this year, the last day you can file Form 2553 is March 15th. And if you file on March 16th, the change will not take effect until next year, the following fiscal year. Let's talk about how to apply for a tax extension. So if you're not going to make it by the deadline, well, don't stress out, okay? You can apply for an extension completely online, and it's very easy too. Just remember that you are getting an extension on your tax filing, not on your payments. The payment due date will not change, and late payments can actually result in fines and penalties. And sole proprietors follow the same steps all individual taxpayers do. So you'll be granted an automatic 6-month extension if you are an individual working in a combat zone in support of the U.S. Armed Forces, spouse included. You are a member of the military serving outside of the United States. You are a U.S. citizen living and working abroad. You are a U.S. citizen living in parts of the country that have been hit by severe natural disasters. Now, one thing I want to say here is that if none of the above apply to you, don't stress. You can always apply for an extension using IRS Form 4868. So the form only applies to sole proprietors or your individual or income tax. So your individual income tax return. So if you plan on paying electronically, you may be able to apply for an extension directly through the IRS payment portal. We actually have covered this on another show. So there are ways to actually to pay the IRS, or there are ways to actually agree or negotiate a payment plan with the agency. They're pretty flexible. And so if you are an individual, you can request an extension using Form 4868. And if you are a business type, you have to use Form 7004. And this can be done again using the IRS e-file service. You need to file a Form 7004 for each return you will be filing late. So it goes through. It's very specific to forms. So the deadline to apply for an extension is the same as the filing deadline. So partnerships and S corporations must apply for an extension by March 15th of this year, and sole proprietors and C corporation must apply for an extension by April 15th of this year. So it's all about what really matters here. Now, remember what I just told you. If the date falls on the weekend, then you have to actually take the next Monday, the next Tuesday, and the next business day. Very important. I want to talk to you about other important tax deadlines you need to keep in mind. So the whole thing here is that while the yearly federal tax return is definitely the big kahuna of tax season, it's important to stay on top of the due date for all other tax forms businesses are responsible for. Obviously, we're speaking about how to file taxes for an LLC with no income. So it's important to actually keep in mind that there are situations where you have to be very careful in terms of the paperwork needed when you file a tax return. Okay, so here are some important taxes and forms with their due date. So we have a 1099 forms. So businesses are commonly responsible for supplying 1099 NEC for independent contractors and 1099 MIS forms based on their activity throughout the year. Okay, and what will happen here is that 2 copies must be filled out, with one sent to the IRS and the other one sent to the recipients of the payments. So both copies must be provided by January 31st of this year for last year's taxes. You also have sales taxes. So sales taxes are not a federal tax, they are a state tax. Because of this, the filing date will vary based on your location. Be mindful of where you have sales tax nexus if you're selling online. Okay, and what I want to say here is that you may be responsible for filing sales taxes in multiple states. And you have to think also about excise taxes. So a business is responsible for paying federal excise taxes on certain products like gas, alcohol, and tobacco. And you report and pay excise. You report and pay excise taxes quarterly using Form 720. We actually have covered this on another show also. If you're interested, let us know. We just send you the link. So these forms that I'm just talking about are due May 2nd, August 1st, and October 31st, with the final quarter being submitted January 31st. So you also have to think about payroll taxes. So if you run payroll, there are multiple forms that must be submitted covering Medicare, Social Security, and unemployment taxes. And the IRS provides a rundown of when payroll tax returns are due on their website. So this is really, really comprehensive. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. We're just having a conversation about how to file taxes for an LLC with no income. And I just walked you through a lot of things. But the bottom line is what? Please, if you have doubt, always file. You never know. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. God bless you. I will speak to you another time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.